Whatever.
I bet you could do it just on the fly. Old man Bill used to do that. He'd get up here and just, somebody did show up, he'd just get up here and he'd just give you a lesson for the whole hour just off the cuff. But I studied a little bit. We'll see how much it worked out. We're back in the end time study, lesson 6. Our learning objectives for tonight are to identify how Daniel's vision helps interpret and explain Nebuchadnezzar's dream, understanding God's consistent work throughout history, which is approaching completion, and feel a sense of urgency about the approaching end times. So let's review last week. We're all here last week? Yeah? You weren't here? Where you were?
Where you going? Somewhere.
All right.
Where everybody think.
So in Daniel 2:31 through 35, what do each part of the statue represent? You remember?
Babylon, Persia.
Babylon, Persia.
The last one was Rome, and then Greece.
Greece. And then Rome. Is that Rome?
Yep.
All right. So the head is Babylon. It was saturated in gold and great splendor. It showed that power was given to the king, power, strength, and glory. And then the breasts and arms of silver were Medo Persia. The belly and thighs of bronze were Greece, and the legs of iron were Rome. And then the feet and toes of iron and clay represent a future kingdom, comprised of a confederation of 10 nations under the rule of the Antichrist, which is still to come. We haven't seen it yet. What do the rock not cut by human hands and the mountain filling the whole earth represent in Daniel 2:35 through 34?
Represents God.
God represents God and His kingdom coming to earth. As the mountain fills the earth, God's kingdom is going to fill the earth. I wrote that a kingdom centered on Israel follows after this age is over, with the rock falling on the feet, and begins with a rock uncut by human hands, falling from heaven. Jesus is the rock returning at His second coming, and the mountain is the millennial kingdom He establishes for Israel after His return. That's pretty good, right? All right, well, let's watch video 6. Hey, turn up that volume there. Curtis? That good?
Let's go to the beasts. This chapter is talking about the same thing, the age of the Gentiles. But now, instead of a timeline, we're talking about the nature of these kingdoms, and in particular, one of them. Here we go, running through this quick. I'm just going to read this to give you the background. Daniel 7, he, in his dream, sees this. The 4 great beasts were coming up from the sea, different from one another. The first was like a lion and had the wings of an eagle. I kept looking until its wings were plucked, and it was lifted up from the ground and made to stand on 2 feet, like a man. A human mind was also given to it. And behold, another beast, a second one, resembling a bear, and it was raised up on one side, and 3 ribs were in the mouth between its teeth, and thus they said to it, Arise and devour much meat. After this I kept looking, and behold, another one, like a leopard, which had on its back 4 wings of a bird. The beast also had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. So let's just, these are low quality graphics, but they make the point. The first one would have to represent who? It's the same story as Daniel 2. So we started in Daniel 2 with a head of gold, which represented Babylon, we're starting this time with a lion with wings, but it's the same story, so the lion and the wings represents Babylon. And here's some additional proof. Recently, after the U.S. went into Iraq and freed Iraq, in Iraq they went to the ancient site of Babylon, and they found this. This is, you can't tell very easily anymore because it's been weathered and worn away, but this is a lion, and the wings that used to be on it have fallen off. The national symbol of Babylon was a lion with wings. Like we have an eagle, they had that. That's a clear representation of Babylon. Then we have the bear on its side. That's a representation of Medo-Persia. They're represented by a bear because the nature of the way they conducted warfare was by brute force. They overwhelmed armies with sheer number. And they were made up from 3 earlier kingdoms. That's why the 3 ribs in the bear's mouth. And then Alexander the Great, he was known for the speed at which his army moved, like a leopard. And when he died, his kingdom was split into how many parts? I already said 4. 4 wings, 4 heads. So we know that this is tracking exactly with the statue. And at this point, we're sort of thinking, well, then why do we have this chapter then if it's just a repetition? Well, it's not a repetition when you get to number 4. Daniel says this, after this I kept looking in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrifying and extremely strong, and it had large iron teeth. It devoured and crushed and trampled down the remainder with its feet. And it was different from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. While I was contemplating the horns, behold, another horn, a little one, came up among them, and 3 of the first horns were pulled out by the roots before it. And behold, this horn possessed eyes like the eyes of a man, and mouth uttering great boasts. In the first 3 examples, Daniel used common animals as a reference, right? Lions, bears, etc. Even though they had some strange features, they started with something you recognize. You notice in this case, he didn't even try. I mean, he's looking at this thing, he's like, I don't even know what to call it. Somebody came up with this idea. I don't know why. I didn't have a better one, so I used it. But the horns here are the real focus, you notice? And so Daniel had the same questions we would have had, which is, what's up with those horns? Then I desired to know the exact meaning of the 4th beast, which was different from all the others, exceedingly dreadful, with its teeth of iron and its claws of bronze, and which devoured, crushed, and trampled down the remainder with its feet. There's that reference again to crushing and breaking into pieces, right? Then he says, and the meaning of the 10 horns that were on its head, and the other horn which came up, and before which 3 of them fell, namely that horn which had eyes and a mouth uttering great boasts, which was larger in appearance than its associates. I kept looking, and that horn was waging war with the saints, and overpowering them, until the Ancient of Days came, and judgment was passed in favor of the saints of the highest one, and the time arrived when the saints took possession of the kingdom. Confirmation again that at the end of these 4 kingdoms, only then do we have the kingdom of the Ancient of Days, the highest one. Going just a step further. Thus, he said, this is the interpretation that Daniel got from an angel. The 4th beast will be a 4th kingdom on the earth, which will be different from all the other kingdoms. It will devour the whole earth and tread it down and crush it. As for the 10 horns, out of this kingdom, now which kingdom are we talking about right now? Of the 4, which one are we talking about? Which one are you living in? All right, so this is talking about our time, roughly, somewhere in our period of the kingdom. Out of this kingdom, 10 kings will arise, and another will arise after them. So you have 10 first, then the 11th shows up after the 10 have already come. Right? Then he says, and he, the 11th one, will be different from the previous 10, and will subdue 3 kings. He will speak out against the Most High and wear down the saints of the highest one, and he will intend to make alterations in times and in law, and they will be given into his hand for a time, times, and half a time. But the court will sit for judgment, and his dominion will be taken away, annihilated, and destroyed forever. Then the sovereignty, the dominion, and the greatness of all the kingdoms under the whole heaven will be given to the people of the saints of the highest one. His kingdom will be an everlasting kingdom, and all dominions will serve and obey him. Let me summarize what we just learned. First, we learned that Daniel 7 just confirms what we saw in Daniel 2. 4 Gentile kingdoms, and the last one is the strange one. And it emphasizes the fourth one, in fact. Daniel 7 is really a detailed description about what goes on during the fourth kingdom. And what we just learned is in the time of the fourth kingdom, we will eventually arrive at a point where the world and this kingdom will be led by only 10 rulers. Have we reached that point? There actually has never yet been a time since Rome became Rome, since the fourth kingdom began, there's never been a time in which we can say the dominant power on the earth had only 10 leaders. We're not yet at this point. And then, I'm going to draw this for you. Oh, by the way, you remember the 10 toes at the end of the statue? The 10 toes at the end of the statue are a confirmation that at the very end of this age, you reach the point of 10 world rulers right before Christ's second coming, which we have not seen yet. We drafted out in a little easier way to see it. This is like the legs of the statue here, okay? So we're looking at the statue right here, sort of on its side. We've reached the point of the fourth kingdom, Rome. Then we heard that east-west division will continue to the end in an imperialistic democratic alliance of some kind. We're still doing that today. We're still in that time today. But at some point in our future, we reach the point where only 10 kings rule the world, essentially. And then while those 10 kings have power, an 11th guy just sort of comes out of nowhere, shows up. And at first, he seems to be playing nicely with the other 10, but at some point, 3 of them are removed. You learn about the way this actually happens in Revelation 13. The short answer is, this guy decides he wants to lead the whole world. These guys decide they don't like the idea. 3 of them decide to try to stop him. They succeed. They actually even kill him. But 3 days after they kill this guy, he resurrects. And the whole world is just marveling at that. They call him the Christ because he resurrected. Turns out they just missed his name by 4 letters. He's the Antichrist. And after he succeeds in coming back from the dead, and if you want to know how that even happens, take the Revelation study. After he succeeds in coming back from the dead, guess what he does to the 3 kings that conspired against him? They're dead. And then the other 7 fall in line. And so you end up with one guy ruling the world with 7 lieutenants underneath him. And this continues on, Scripture says, until what? What event brings all of this to its completion? The rock that comes from heaven, Christ's second coming. This age, this fourth Gentile kingdom, will continue until the second coming of Christ, and it still has these events left ahead of it. After Jesus arrives, of course, we reach the point of the kingdom. Here's 2 more ways to look at it. One of them is in a handout you've already received. This is another way of sort of representing the 4 stages, with the church sort of in the middle of this one. This is not meant to be representative of time. I don't mean to suggest this is to scale. It's just in order. But we need to get to a point of an Antichrist, we need the Christ's second coming, and then the mountain of the kingdom that is to follow. Here's the one you have as your handout. It represents the same. All right, now, if this is all we were going to do tonight, you'd probably be sitting there like, oh, come on. It's like going back to school. All right, this was the hard part. Now, we're going to move quickly to some fun things. I think of it as fun. Maybe I'm the only one. I want to talk to you about why the age of the Gentiles exists. Because that's the fundamental question, isn't it? Why? This is what we read in Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy is where you find Moses reading to the nation of Israel their law as they enter into it in a new generation. And at the very end he says this, "Not with you alone am I making this covenant or this oath, but both with those who stand here with us today in the presence of the Lord and with those who are not here with us today." Here's what we just learned. In the law given in Deuteronomy 29, the old covenant was established not just with one generation of people, but with all generations of Israel. That is to say, it's not an individual covenant. No one went up to each individual Jew and said, do you want to be part of the old covenant or not? They didn't have a choice. When that generation agreed to it, it became a national covenant, and all Israel is bound to it for all time. Let me give you an analogy. If you go to Candlelight today, there's a bunch of water in it. And if you could count all the individual water molecules that are in that body of water and name them all, and then come back in a year, and if I come back in a year, there's still a body of water. We still call it Canyon Lake, but it would be a different group of water molecules, right? Think of Israel like that. We have Israel today. There was Israel 1,000 years ago. There'll be Israel tomorrow. But it's a different group of people every time. The covenant is with the group, not with a certain group of people. And if you are part of Israel, and that is to say if you're descended from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, then you are in that covenant. If you're circumcised, you enter into the Abrahamic covenant. But if you are born into the nation, you are under the old covenant, according to what Moses wrote. Hold that thought. Then we go to Leviticus. You shall keep my Sabbaths and reverence my sanctuary. I am the Lord. And then he says this, if you walk in my statutes and keep my commandments, then I will give to you. And in what follows for the next 13 verses in Leviticus is a list of wonderful blessings that God said Israel would receive if they could keep the law perfectly. Sounds like a hard thing to do, doesn't it? That's why at verse 14 it says this. But if you do not obey me and do not carry out all these commandments, if you reject my statutes and break my covenant, I in turn will do this to you. And then you have twice as many verses to follow that speak about all these curses that Israel would have to suffer, the nation would have to suffer for their inability to keep the law perfectly. You hear what I'm saying? It's a national covenant. Every single living Jew must keep every single law in the law of the covenant perfectly for their entire lifetime. If even one Jew breaks even one law, then the entire nation gets all the curses. That doesn't really sound like a good deal, does it? That's why Moses offered it twice. That's why Moses said to the nation of Israel, are you sure you want this? Let's try this again. Do you really want? And they all said, yeah, sign us up for this. Why would God do that? Why did God do that? Let me put it to you simply. Keep the law perfectly, and they would receive the blessings which represent the kingdom, all the goodness of the kingdom. But if they do not keep the covenant, then they receive the curses of the law. That, in a summary, is what the law required of Israel. And friends, the age of the Gentiles is the fulfillment of those curses. It's God acting according to the old covenant law to fulfill what his word said he would do against the people who could not keep the law perfectly. But you're still sitting there saying to yourself, well, wait a minute, no one can keep the law perfectly. Exactly. So that's why Moses wrote this in Deuteronomy. He said, after all these curses have been played out, Moses said, then the Lord your God will circumcise your heart and the heart of your descendants, so that you will love your God with all your heart, soul, with all of your heart and your soul, so that you may live. And then he says, I will inflict all these curses on your enemies. And he says, you will again obey the Lord. And look, he says, you will observe all his commandments. And then at the end he says, you will turn to the Lord your God with all your heart and soul. All right, so what did we just learn there? In Deuteronomy 30, Moses said Israel will one day be regathered to her land, hearts circumcised, living in perfect obedience to the law, and they will receive as a result the blessings of the old covenant prospering in their land. In other words, when Israel can keep the law perfectly, then they receive the kingdom. Still feels like a trap, doesn't it? Come back on the fourth night, and I'll show you how God fulfills that. Meanwhile, I still want to answer this question for you. How can Israel ever keep the law perfectly and satisfy the terms of the old covenant? Well, guess what? There's a loophole, as I like to call it, in the law. In Leviticus 26, he says, if they confess their iniquity and the iniquity of their forefathers in their unfaithfulness which they committed against me, and also in their acting with hostility against me, and I'm jumping to verse 42, then I will remember my covenant with Jacob, and I will remember also my covenant with Isaac and my covenant with Abraham as well, and I will remember the land. All right, what did we just read? Let me summarize this. There is, as I call it, a loophole in the old covenant. It permits the nation of Israel to receive all the blessings of the kingdom in another way. If they can't keep the law perfectly, here's a second way they can get the blessings. And the second way is the nation as a whole. Now remember, this is a national covenant. It doesn't work for just one person to do this. The national covenant says they must confess their sin and their forefathers' sin. That is, they have to confess that their forefathers were sinning when they crucified the Lord. And as they do that, they will basically be doing a national confession of faith. And as a national confession of faith, the entire nation will be brought into faith and will be granted the blessings of of the kingdom as a result of faith. God will then set aside the old covenant to bless Israel on the basis of the Abrahamic covenant. Now, if an individual Jew comes to faith today, they come out from under the law just as we or anyone else would, and they are saved by their faith and no longer under this law. But as a nation, the nation continues on without them under this restriction. Here's my summary before we do the last part. The old covenant requires perfect obedience to the law. Failure to keep it results in the curses. The age of the Gentiles, which we're currently in, is the fulfillment of those curses. One day, Israel will confess Christ, and as a result, then the rock will return, will set up the kingdom for Israel, and the age of the Gentiles will come to its conclusion. When is that going to happen? Well, that's going to happen according to something we're going to study today in Daniel 9. This is the last part. I know we're right at the limit of time. I'm going to ask for a few more minutes of your time because this is where we get the punch that I told you was coming. In Daniel 9, 1 through 3, Daniel is in captivity. He reads out of the prophet Jeremiah, and guess what he discovers? He discovers in Jeremiah's prophecy that there were 70 years, or so Daniel thought, of time for the age of the Gentiles. Guess what? He was way wrong. As a result, what Daniel starts to do is really interesting. His prayer, he starts praying the prayer of the loophole. He starts praying the Leviticus 26 prayer. He starts confessing his sin and the sin of his forefathers, or so he thought. He thought he was ushering in the kingdom. He was wrong. So God sent an angel, Gabriel, to Daniel and told Daniel, hey, we like you, you're a good guy, but you got this wrong. And they correct Daniel, and here's what he's told. He says to Daniel, 70 weeks have been decreed for your people. Not just 70 years, 70 weeks. Now, the word weeks in Hebrew, in your Bible it's weeks perhaps, but in Hebrew it's Shabbat. It just means 7. Like we have the word dozen to mean 12, they use the word Shabbat to mean 7. But is it days? Is it weeks? What is it? Well, we know that it cannot be weeks or months because Jews don't count those in sevens. They count days in sevens and they count years in sevens. They don't count months or weeks in sevens. Just like you count donuts and eggs in dozens, but you don't count most other things with the word dozen. You say 12. All right, so it's either a day or a year. And then when you look at the fact that Daniel thought it was 70 years, and Gabriel says, no, it's 70 times 7, he's also speaking of years. In other words, Daniel is being told, no, Daniel, you don't have 70 years of the age of the Gentiles, you have 490 years. And then he goes on, he says, it's so that your people in Israel and Jerusalem can gain the benefit of finishing their sin under the old covenant, making an end for it, atoning for it, bringing in everlasting righteousness, and so on. These are the reasons for the age of the Gentiles coming upon Israel, for their benefit in the long run. So the 77s of Daniel 9 is the age of the Gentiles, and it's telling us it will last 490 years. But now, if you know your math at this point, you know it's been a lot longer than 490 years since Nebuchadnezzar came in and destroyed Jerusalem. So let me show you how you find where you are in history on the 490 years. This is really hard to see, so I'm going to read it. Daniel 9:25, the angel Gabriel tells Daniel, from the issuing of a decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem, that's right here, there will be 7 weeks. 7 times 7? 49 years. Then he gives another marker in time. He says, it will be built again with plaza and moat. That's when the walls will be finished. And he adds, the Messiah, the Prince, will come and will be cut off after 62 more of those 7s. So when you add up these markers, the decree being issued, walls being finished, and the Messiah being cut off, you already have 69 of the 77s, that is 483 of the 490 years. They're already accounted for, but where did the clock stop? Messiah being cut off, that's a reference to our Lord dying on the cross. So by the time Jesus came, we were already 483 years of the 490 of the age of the Gentiles. That should mean what? That should mean we only have 7 years left before the second coming of Christ. Why didn't Jesus come back 7 years after he left? Why aren't we already done? Well, the last week goes like this. Some person, will make a firm covenant with the many, some group, for 1 week. There's our missing week. So we know that it starts with a covenant, but you notice there's a gap. This is not connected to this. He doesn't say after the Messiah is cut off, there will be a covenant. It's just hanging out here in time somewhere. It's disconnected from the last time marker. These are all connected to one another in the text. This one is not. So there's 70 altogether, but there's this pause. There's a pause. It's literally like if you were watching a football game in the last 2 minutes and the clock was stopped and somebody who didn't know the game asked you, how much longer is this game going to go on? You'd have to tell them, we don't know, because the clock stopped. Friends, the age of the Gentiles only lasts 490 years, but the thing is, right now, the clock is stopped. We're still waiting for that last 7 years to start. Let's look at our clues here as we finish. Israel entered into this national covenant that they couldn't keep, and God knew they wouldn't keep it. The consequences for failing to keep it is the age of the Gentiles, when Israel is oppressed by Gentile kingdoms. That age began before the first coming of Christ, way back in 605 BC, and it continues until the return of Christ when he sets up his kingdom, which we're still waiting for. It will last a total of 490 years, but there's a pause in the clock, so we really don't know how long the whole thing will last. That pause began when Jesus was cut off, that is to say, when he died. It's still going on today, but when it restarts, then you can know for certain that you are only 7 years away from Israel confessing Christ and Jesus' second coming. Why do you think there's this pause? You remember this statement that God made to Abraham back in Genesis 22? He said to Abraham, in your seed all the nations shall be blessed. What was he talking about when he said nations? The word in Hebrew is goy, which is the same word as Gentiles. All the Gentile nations will be blessed. How is God going to bless all the Gentile nations? Well, the age of the Gentiles was necessary in order for God to do that. Why did he need it? Why does he set Israel aside? Why is there a pause in the clock? Let me show you why. What fits in that pause? You. Why has God put a pause on the clock with Israel? Because like Paul says in Romans 11, he says, I don't want you to be uninformed, brethren, about a mystery here, that there's a partial hardening happening to Israel right now. Eventually, Israel will be saved. But for now, he has held Israel out of what Israel has been promised, that is the kingdom, so that a group of people who are not his people, the Gentiles, may come to know Christ in the intermediate period, in this time when the clock is paused. And that clock is being paused for you. That's the wisdom, that's the majesty, that's the awesome power of God. He has orchestrated the events of the last several thousand years so that he could be just in denying his own people the kingdom they were promised because of a covenant they freely entered into, which holds them accountable for a law they could not keep. And that way, God can also offer the kingdom to you, who he promised Abraham he would do. But friends, just like we learned last week, when the clock starts up again, then time runs out fast. The opportunity returns to the Jews, and the Gentiles are no longer the focus as much. You don't want to wait to find out if you're going to be included at that point. You'd want to know now, wouldn't you? I hope you've understood something tonight that's very important, that we are near the end of something God has set out just for your sake. And when it's concluded, then a whole bunch of other things start to happen very quickly.
Want to talk slower?
Yeah, it goes
Put
too
them on half
fast.
speed.
Uh,
I can put them on half speed, we'll be here all night. What was the most memorable detail of the video tonight to you? I like these questions. I think for me, it's where God put the pause in there for the Gentiles to come to know Christ, that we could all come, get a chance to know Christ. I know the Jews probably would, and it'd be great to have the kingdom of the Lord in, but I like the opportunity that I get to know Christ, get to go to heaven. Anybody else? So how does Daniel 7 correspond to Daniel 2? Will the beast in Daniel 7 correspond to the statue in Daniel 2? Pretty much, they say two sides of the same coin. Will represent Babylon, Media, Persia, Greece, Rome, and then the new kingdom. Kingdom to come. You know, I'm trying to figure out what 10 countries would be. What 10 kings are going to be the rulers? I figured I thought maybe it'd be like NATO. You know how many people are in NATO? There's 32 countries in NATO. That's too many. The what?
The Club of Rome, they already designated the 10 regions instead of just kingdom.
The 10 regions in the in the globalism, Rome rising from the ashes. Yeah, I read there. I can't recite them to you, but. All right, so how are the dreams of Nebuchadnezzar and Daniel two sides of the same coin? I guess we kind of discussed that. They represent the same countries. And at the end, the fourth one in Daniel's dream is going to destroy the rest of them. Right? And then it's going to bring in Christ. Anybody got anything different? No. Nope. All right. We want to read Daniel 7, 1 through 8. Am I talking too fast?
No, you're not talking as fast as you did.
Anybody?
Oh, okay.
7:1.
1 through 8.
In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream and visions of his head while on his bed. Then he wrote down the dream, telling the main facts. Daniel spoke, saying, I saw my vision by night, and behold, the four winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea, and four great beasts came up from the sea, each different from the other. The first was like a lion and had eagle's wings. I watched till its wings were plucked off, and it was lifted up from the earth and made to stand on 2 feet like a man, and a man's mark was given to it. And suddenly another beast, a second like a bear, it was raised up on one side and had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth. And they said thus to it, Arise, devour each flesh. After this I looked, and there was another, like a leopard, which had on its back 4 wings of a bird. The beast also had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. After this I saw in the night visions, and behold, the 4th beast, dreadful and terrible and exceedingly strong. It had huge iron teeth, it was devouring, breaking in pieces, and trampling the residue with its feet. It was different from all the beasts that were before it, It had 10 horns. It was considering the horns. And there was another horn, a little one, coming up among them, before whom 3 of the first horns were plucked out by the roots. And there in the horns were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking pompous words.
All right, and then Daniel 7:19 through 27. Then I would know the truth of the fourth beast, which was diverse from all the others, exceeding dreadful, whose teeth were of iron and his nails of brass, which devoured, brake in pieces, and stamped the residue with his feet. And the 10 horns that were in his head, and of the other which came up, and before whom 3 fell, even of that horn that had eyes and a mouth that spake very great things, whose look was more stout than his fellows. I beheld, and the same horn made war with the saints and prevailed against them, until the Ancient of Days came, and judgment was given to the saints of the Most High. And the time came that the saints possessed the kingdom. Thus he said, the 4 beasts shall be the 4th kingdom upon earth, which shall be diverse from all kingdoms, and shall devour the whole earth, and shall tread it down, and break it in pieces. And the 10 horns out of the kingdom are 10 kings that shall arise, and another shall rise after them, and he shall be diverse from the first, and he shall subdue 3 kings. And he shall speak great words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and think to change times and laws. And they shall be given into his hand until the time and times and the dividing of time. But the judgment shall sit, and they shall take away his dominion, to consume and to destroy it until the end. And the kingdom and dominion and the greatness of the kingdom under the whole heaven shall be given to the people of the saints of the Most High, whose kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and all dominions shall serve and obey him. So looking at this table, what new information are we learning about the kingdoms beyond what we learned in Daniel 2? So in Daniel 7, what we learned that we didn't learn in Daniel 2? Didn't learn nothing.
I wasn't good at school either.
So we know the head is Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar, right? In Daniel 2. And that's about the same we're learning in Daniel 7, that he was the first kingdom. He's the one that's there. He's like a lion. Then after that shall rise another kingdom in Daniel 2. That's the Medo-Persia. And they're going to conquer Babylon. Well, it says the same thing in Daniel 2, that the second beast is going to come and rise up and destroy the first with its Medo-Persia. And then I'm looking at the same thing you're looking at.
Too far, can't see it.
Oh, it was pretty good.
I can't read it. Turn around our chairs.
Well, I'm telling you what I said.
Go ahead, I'm just trying to.
I can't make it any bigger out there. Y'all want? We can sit closer. Y'all want to get up on the front row?
Then you can read that one.
I have to stay back. Not to read that. So the third one is Greece. So the third country is Greece. Greece is going to destroy Medo-Persia. They're going to take over the area, and the leopard, the same is going to come. The leopard has 4 wings because when Alexander the Great, right, when he dies, it's split between his 4 generals. So the kingdom splits into 4 countries. And then the legs can't come in. That represents Rome. And Rome is going to take over almost 90% of the populated world at that time, right? They do a number on everybody. And they come in as the fourth beast, dreadful and terrible and strong, exceeding. They step on everything and smack it out. We also learned that there's 10 horns in the 10 countries, but there were 10 toes on the statue, which were the 10 kings. That's about the same. But it doesn't say anything on the one in Daniel 2 about the little horn, right? We're learning about the little horn in Daniel 7 that's going to rise up, who's going to turn out to be the Antichrist. He's going to take out 3 of the kings, so it's going to be down to 7 kings and the Antichrist that are going to rule the world at that part. When Jesus, God comes back and destroys the world and takes over and brings in, he brings his kingdom back there. Right? Does that all sound right? No, nobody's disagreeing. You good with all that, Tony? I'm just kidding. All right. Well, let's read Deuteronomy 29, 9 through 15. Okay, fine. Y'all just going to start off on that first?
Keep therefore the words of this covenant, and do them, that ye may prosper in all that ye do. You stand this day, all of you, before the Lord your God, your captains of your tribes, your elders and your officers, with all the men of Israel. Your little ones, your wives, thy stranger that is in thy camp, from the hewer of thy wood unto the drawer of thy water, that thou shouldest enter into the covenant with the Lord thy God, and into his oath, which the Lord thy God maketh with thee this day, that he may establish thee today for a people unto himself, that he may unto thee as God, and he that said unto thee, and as he hath sworn unto the fathers, to Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. Neither with you only do I make this covenant and this oath, but with him that standeth here with us this day, the Lord our God, and also with him that is not here with us today. For ye know how we have dwelt in the land of Egypt, and how we came through the nations which we passed by. Ye have seen their abominations and their idols, wood and stone, silver and gold, which were among them. Lest there should be among you man or woman or family or tribe whose heart turneth away this day from the Lord our God. Go and serve the gods of these nations. Lest there shall be among you a root, a pair of gall, and wormwood. And it come to pass, when he heareth the word of this curse, and he bless himself in his heart, saying, I shall have peace, though I walk in the imagination of mine heart, to have drunkenness to thirst.
So the old covenant was established with all future generations of Israel. This was not an individual covenant, it was a national covenant that Israel as a group was bound to. Why does the age of the Gentiles exist?
Because they couldn't keep the law.
They couldn't keep the law. Well, it was like a fulfillment of the curses of not keeping the covenant. Gives the Gentiles a chance to come to know the Lord.
Can you imagine having to keep all those laws?
Could you imagine even trying? Could you imagine the amount of animals I'd have to own? I have to go sacrifice whatever they had to go to. I just have to herd them all.
It'd be like somebody said, I don't ever see it. I never do see it.
Yeah.
They have to be perfect.
She's lying right
Yeah.
there.
act any different than why it exists. They're all good. Am I talking too loud?
No.
Oh,
Can't hear you.
you can't hear me? So why, anybody got anything different of why the age of the Gentiles exists? And it pretty much to fulfill the curse. You know, they had a split there. The Jews are being punished basically by God at this time. He's going to draw them all back. They're all going to be their need, except them at some point in time. All right, so let's read Leviticus 26, 2 through 4, and 14 through 16. Ye shall keep my Sabbaths and reference my sanctuary. I am the Lord. If ye walk in my statutes and keep my commandments and do them, then I will give you rain in due season, and the land shall yield her increase, and the trees of the field shall yield their fruit. But if ye will not hearken unto me, and will not do all these commandments, and if ye shall despise my statutes, or if your soul abhor my judgments, so that ye will not do all my commandments, but that ye break my covenant, I also will do this unto you. I will even appoint over you terror, consumption, and the burning ague, that shall consume the eyes and cause sorrow of the heart, and ye shall sow your seed in vain, for your enemies shall eat it. How do these verses predict the consequences that occur to Israel? How do these verses predict the consequences that occur to Israel? Well, it tells them over here, if you keep my covenant and the Sabbaths and do everything I told you to do, that you'll have good rainy seasons, and the yields will increase, and the threshings will reach until the vineyard, and it'll give peace to the land. And he gives them a whole bunch of other things, all the way down to 14. And then he says, but if ye will not hearken unto me, I will do all these commandments. And then tells them all the bad stuff he's going to do for them. So if God thought he was going to keep them all right, he wouldn't have put this other bad part over here, because he would, God knows. But, I would pay attention to it. I got nothing. You got nothing?
One thing that strikes me is it is amazing that even today, back in those days, God gave choices. And we still have choices today, and there's consequences from those choices. Like
Oh, yeah. Y'all hear that? Makes sense? All right, let's read Leviticus 26 through 40. Will we find that? Or you want me to read it? 26, 40 through 45. I'm sorry, not 26 through 40. 40 through 45.
If they confess their iniquity and the iniquity of their forefathers and their unfaithfulness, which they committed against me, and also if their acting with hostility against me, I also will act with hostility against them, to bring them into the land of their enemies. Or if their uncircumcised heart becomes humble, so that they then make amends for their iniquity, then I will remember my covenant with Jacob, and I will remember also my covenant with Isaac, and my covenant with Abraham as well, and I will remember the land. For the land shall be abandoned by them, and shall make up for its Sabbath, while it is made desolate without them. they, meanwhile, shall be making amends for their iniquity, because they rejected my ordinances and their soul abhorred my statutes. Yet, in spite of this, when they are in the land of their enemies, I will not reject them, nor will I so abhor them as to destroy them, breaking my covenant with them. For I am the Lord their God. But I will remember for them the covenant with the ancestors whom I brought out of the land of Egypt, in the sight of the nations, that I might be their God. I am the Lord.
All right, so there's a loophole, as it calls it, in the Old Covenant that permits the nation of Israel to receive the blessings in another way, but a national confession of faith is required. The Old Covenant requires perfect obedience to the law by all generations of Israel. Failure to perfectly keep the law results in the curses of the law. The age of the Gentiles is the fulfillment of the curses against Israel. And one day, Israel will confess Christ and receive the blessings of the kingdom on the basis of the Abrahamic covenant. Outline of Daniel 9. Daniel 1 through 3 is Daniel's mistake when he thought it would only be 70 years. Daniel 4 through 19 is Daniel's prayer where he tries to confess the iniquities of Israel and bring in the kingdom of God, God's kingdom. And then Daniel 9, 20 through 23 is Gabriel's rebuke to him, where Gabriel explains to him what he actually read, what it really means to him. So the purpose of 77s is for Israel and Jerusalem to finish the transgression, make an end of sin, atone for Israel's sin, bring everlasting righteousness, seal up the prophecy, and anoint the temple. Daniel 77s is the age of the Gentiles and will last 490 years. And we're waiting for the last 7 years block to start. Yeah, we're in the pause now with the church age. So I guess when the Antichrist shows up, that's when the last 7 years start.
And he signs a covenant.
He signs a covenant with Israel, then the last 7 years start. Well, that's all of that part. Let's go to the application part. The kingdoms described in the dreams of the statue and the beast are all kingdoms that rise to power and then pass away as others take over. How does that influence your view of the current powerful kingdoms, nations on earth? Do you believe those in power now might one day be out of power?
Yeah.
Well, it shows that nobody stays in power forever, right? No matter how big, and as big as Rome and powerful as Rome was, they still fell. So you believe all those in power, even the United States at some point?
Yeah.
Yeah, I do too.
Mom heard.
Hopefully it's longer than quick. So read Romans 11, 25 through 29. Anybody got that? Romans 11, 25 through 29. You got it, David? I said 25 through 29. To 29. Romans 11, 25 to 29.
For I do not desire rather that you should be ignorant of this mystery, lest you should be wise in your own opinion. The blindness is in part, as happened to Israel. until the close of the Gentiles has come. And so all Israel will be saved, as it is written, the deliverer will come out of Zion, and he will turn away ungodliness from Jacob. For it is in my covenant with them, when I take away their sin. Concerning the gospel, they are enemies of your sake, but concerning the elections, they are beloved for the sake of the Father, for the gift of the calling of God are irrevocable.
God put a pause in the clocks. God put a pause in the clock so that the Gentiles could come to know Christ and God. How does this align with the Great Commission given by Jesus to his disciples in Matthew 28:19 through 20? Opportunity. Oh, right. Told them to go out throughout the world and spread the word, right? Let everybody know about Jesus. Sure. But yeah, give everyone an opportunity to go out, share Christ, to disciple with someone. So you think that pause will go until all the ages of the world have been reached and everyone's at least heard about Jesus? Or do you think, the Bible doesn't really say how long it's going to last, right? And how long do you think it'll be for everyone to come to know? There's so many people in just America that know about Christ, they just turn their back on it. It's sad.
I used to think there was one person that had to finally believe, but then I don't know, when you start looking at 144,000 evangelists, in Revelation that are gonna spread the gospel throughout the world, then I don't know